Hey there! This is the second episode of my video series on how to create, release, and automate the releases of GitHub Actions. And in this episode, I'm going to show you how you can release the created GitHub Action into the GitHub Marketplace. If you didn't watch the first episode, I encourage you to do so. There is a link in the info card. But if you already have an action that you want to release, this video is for you. So the first thing we need to know, and this is especially true for JavaScript actions, is that once your action gets used by another workflow, by another repository, there is no initialization script or anything. There is no way for us to do something like npm install. GitHub relies upon that all the files that our action needs during runtime are present in the repository itself. As we've used the actions core package, which is a node modules package or an npm package, and if you're creating an action, you probably also want to rely on other node module packages. This basically means that we would have to commit the node modules folder into our repository. And well, if you're like me, you're probably going to be like, I actually don't want this. And it's true. I don't want this. I don't like it for a lot of reasons. First of all, the node modules folder is a deeply nested folder of thousands of files usually, meaning that whenever we have a change in our code or in the dependency, we have to commit a lot of file, and it just obscures what we are actually changing in our application. It will also make checkout times, push times that much longer, and it just doesn't feel right to have a node modules folder, which is a generated folder present in our repository. It's also not best practice. And for example, when I saw this the first time in an action, I kind of was thrown off by this. So it also creates confusion amongst developers who might not be familiar with GitHub Actions. Luckily, we are in the JavaScript world and we have an ecosystem that is rich of builders and bundlers because, of course, in the front end, where you can also use JavaScript, you have kind of like the same constraints, right? In a browser or in a web application, you cannot push the node modules folder over the wire to your end users. You kind of have to package and bundle it into single files that then get executed. And this is exactly the same that we need to do with GitHub Actions. So the way I approach this is that I use one of those bundlers. I build together a single index.js file from all the dependencies and all the files that I have in my project. And then I actually just execute this file. And the bundler of my choosing, and which is what I am also going to show you in this scenario, is ESBuild. It's an extremely fast JavaScript bundler. It's pretty new in the ecosystem. And but it gains a lot of traction, and it does exactly this. It will package the entire node modules. It will package the entire project into a single index.js file. Now, if you actually skim through the official actions documentation of GitHub, you will find that they are recommending Versal NCC or Versal's NCC package, which basically does the same. It's also a compiler that will do the same thing, package the node modules into a single file. The reason I am choosing ESBuild is very simple. Usually I develop in TypeScript. I also develop my actions in TypeScript, and ESBuild supports TypeScript out of the box. NCC doesn't. So this is the reason for ESBuild, and well, maybe also see it a little bit as an alternative to the GitHub documentation that I will show you how to do it with ESBuild. So let's dive in and let's come back into our Visual Studio Code and into the files of our actions. So the very first thing I need to do is npm install ESBuild, and I'm going to do this as a dev dependency because we only required it during development. The next thing that I need to do is create the ESBuild configuration file, which is a esbuild.cgs file on the root of our repository. CGS stands for Common.js, and it is the module system that ESBuild for now relies on. Now, to avoid having to type the configuration down and bore you with typing, I already copied it. So this is the configuration that we are using for ESBuild, and it has a lot of things. Bundle, of course, well, let me focus it for real. Bundle, of course, because this is what we actually want to achieve. We want to bundle the application. We can minify it. We don't have to minify it. Minify it means that it will make the JavaScript file as short as possible, kind of like creating variable names that are not very speaking anymore. But this is no problem because, well, it's just a generated file. And for this, I also create a source map. This is kind of like important in case you're having errors in your actions. And if you have a source map, those errors, will point back to the original files of your project. Then a few other things. Of course, the platform is Node. The entry point is source-index.js. We say where we want to have the output file. In our case, this is in the dist folder index.js. And again, we have to give it a target so it understands which features of Node.js it can compile to, so which features are available, and which features maybe of newer Node.js versions it has to transpile down into Node 16s. And this is a nice hint. With ESBuild, you are also able to use features of newer Node.js version which are not yet natively available in GitHub Actions, because GitHub Actions, at least right now, only supports Node 16. So that's basically all. The next thing we need to do is create a build command, and we're going to do this in our package JSON. We say build, and we just build by executing this CGS file. And let's go ahead and run the build command and see if it works. And that was pretty fast, as you've seen. And it now created the dist directory, and in the dist directory, as we've wanted, it created the index.js. And as you can see, it did so by also minifying our sources. This file is now all we need to run the action from another workflow. But as you can see, and you will see, or you will have the same thing if you are actually using the Node template for repository, it's grayed out, meaning it is currently on our .gitignore list. And we need to change this because, as stated before, we need to have all the files that our action requires to run in the repository. So we actually need to commit this file. Let's search for the dist. In this case, I'm going to just remove it. And now we see that our dist folder is now part of the normal repository as soon as we add and commit it. Now you might say, okay, but these files are also generated. What is the advantage over having node modules? Well, the advantage is, of course, this is a single file. You can handle it way easier and way better than an entire node modules directory. So, you know, that's a huge advantage for me. The last thing we need to do now is to change our metadata, because it still points to the source index.js file, which now does not contain all it needs. And we need to change it to actually point to the dist/index.js file. And before I commit, I am also going to adjust our workflow, our test workflow, because right now the problem is that you also might run into, and that I ran into when I did this for the first time, is that I didn't really test the bundling here, because due to me executing npm CI at this stage, the node modules folder was there, but this is not the same environment as you have when the action is executed from another repository. The node modules folder won't be there. So you don't actually catch errors during your build process. So what I'm doing here is I run a rm-rf node modules after I installed. And the reason I still install this is that, of course, we also need to do a build in this case, as we need to build our dist folder in the index.js folder before we can use it. Of course, we are going to commit it, but it's still a good idea to have the build command as part of your workflow. For example, if you later rely on actually having a pull request workflow where you usually don't commit the build sources directly, or in other words, I often forget to build the stuff and then commit it. And then my pull request or my action executes on an older version of my file because it executes on the build sources which are outdated. And, you know, I kind of miss, again, errors and don't test what I actually want to test. So, long story short, we have all we need and we are ready to actually commit this. And let's name this CI changed, or not CI, let's name it feed prepared action to be released. And the reason I'm doing here these prefixes to my commit messages, you're going to learn about this in the next episode. Let's commit it. Let's push it. And while it pushes, let's head over to our repository and just check if actually our tests are still successful, and well, test if actually our index.js is now runnable on its own. And let's just wait a little bit longer. It runs the build now, it removes node modules, and perfect, it worked. So we did everything right, but we now have our bundled sources within our repository, and actually we are almost ready to release our action to the marketplace. One little last thing that I want to do before we actually release it is give this entire action a branding. What does it mean by branding? Let's go over to the marketplace and have a look at it. And by looking at the marketplace and looking at the actions of the marketplace, you can see that all actions have this little icon and a color. And actually what you can do is you can choose the icon and the color of your action and how it will appear in the marketplace. And there is a pretty cool app that will help you with all the options that you have, and it's called the GitHub Action Branding. I'm going to put the link, of course, into the description. It showcases you basically all the icons that are available, and it showcases you all the colors that are available, so you can click through the colors here, whatever you want. Let's go with maybe a green color. And for our action, we are going to use, let me check, maybe the crosshair. Well, why not a crosshair? It's nice. We can click on this and it will actually show us here on the right side which configuration we need to put into our metadata file for this branding to appear. And let's copy it. Let's go back into our code. Let's go into our metadata file and append this branding. If it lets me, now it lets me, append this branding into the metadata. Let's just go with chore adjusts branding, commit the entire thing, push it, and now we are really ready to release this action to the marketplace. So you might have seen it before when we were in our repository that due to GitHub now realizing that we have an action YAML file, it offers you already to publish this action to the GitHub Marketplace by drafting a release. And this is exactly what we're going to do. You can either click this button here, draft release, or you can go to the button down here and say create a new release in case you clicked away this action. So let's just go to this one. The first thing that you see here is that we now have the option to publish this action to the GitHub Marketplace. Perfect. But let's not do this yet. Let's first create the release, test this release from another repository, and then publish it to the marketplace, because of course we don't want to publish anything that is not working, right? The first thing we have to do is create a tag or choose a tag that is already existing. And the best practice, and this is also what is required by GitHub Action, is that you actually give it a tag in the format of V for version, and then a best thing is a semantic version, so it's a version containing of a major version, a minor version, and a patch version. If you're not familiar with semantic versioning, I'm going to put a link into the description where you can read all about it. But this is kind of like the format that GitHub expects of you for your actions. And this is also the format, if we just click back into the marketplace real quick, that you will see for any action that is published here. For example, the first interaction action also follow this format with v.111. And yeah, it's just a good practice to follow along with this because it has proven to be very useful. And we're also going to learn in the next episode why this is even more useful, but more on this later. So we are going to create this tag when we publish this release. We can give it a release title, so we can say initial release here. We can also put in a description what this release is all about with Markdown, what you're familiar. I'm going to skip this for now as I don't want to bore you with any contents. You can make this a pre-release if you really want to test things before you actually release them, but we are going to skip this step for now and just publishing this release. And as you can see now, the release has been published under the version 1.0.0. And before, as I said before, we want to now publish it to the marketplace. Let's test it from another repository. I did this for my purposes. I created an action test repository. This is my personal repository where I test all my actions if need be. And the way we can do this is we can simply go into the workflows folder and create a new file here. We say on workflow dispatch, so this action gets executed, or this workflow gets executed, if we write it correctly, manually. Let's also just give it a name real quick. Name test YouTube demo action. And the jobs, the jobs we are using here is the test, let's name it YouTube action. It's going to run on Ubuntu latest, and the steps it is using, in our case now, it uses the action that we created, and this is always of the format owner of the action / the name of the action. This is also what you find if we click on our repository back. This is what you find here in the URL. So you can go with, copy this to make life easier. Go over here, sorry, I moved the window. They've loaded action, and now we also need to assign the version. We can either give it also the main branch here if we actually want to test the main branch, but as we've just released actually a version, we are going with this version that we released, version 1.0.0. And what we can also test now is that our inputs are actually working. So we are going to create a person here. Let's go with Catwoman for now to see if it actually makes a difference. Let's name this file test YT demo action or something .yaml, and commit this entire thing either directly to the main branch, but you can also commit it to another branch. It doesn't really matter. And if we go into our actions now, test the YouTube action and trigger this workflow, we will hopefully see that our action is executed correctly. Let's refresh. Workflow was triggered. Let's go in here. Wait for the response, and perfect. It seems to have run successful. And if we go into it, perfect. Hello, Catwoman. We've run our action for the first time from another repository, and we proved that it works. So all that's left to do now is publish it to the GitHub Marketplace. So we go back into the source repository. We edit the release that we've just created. And now we can set the check mark here on publish this action to the GitHub Marketplace. The nice thing is that GitHub will now also conduct a little check of our metadata file if everything looks correct. And for example, if you forgot a description or if you forgot to give it a branding or anything, GitHub will show you a warning here that indicates that you might need to do some more work before you can actually, well, before you should publish this action. In our case, everything is fine. A README exists, perfect. We can give it a category. We have to give it at least a single category. So let's go with testing for here because there is no real category for demoing actions, but it's fine. And now let's go down and update the release. And that's it. It now lives on the marketplace, and we can either reach it through this link here. We can reach it if we go to our repository's root site and, well, have this button now here, view it on the marketplace, or we can reach it by searching on it on the marketplace. And let's click on here for now. And perfect. This is it basically. As you can see, we have our branding here, the crosshair that we've chosen in the green color. We get our README here. Of course, for you, it would probably make sense to put some documentation on how to use this action, put some documentation about the inputs into the README, as it will appear on the marketplace page. And this is usually the first thing that people see when they discover your action. And now people are ready to use it. They can click here, use the latest version, and they will basically get a template that they can copy and now just use in their own personal workflow. And that's it for this episode. We released our action. We are very happy. But we are not 100% happy yet because, well, this is still very manual. You know, building the files manually, committing them, pushing them, and then going to the release page, create a tag manually, release it to the marketplace manually. These are all tasks that kind of like, you know, I don't want to bother with it. And I am developing GitHub Actions. I am actually automating stuff. So of course I want to automate my releases as well. And this will be the content of the next video. Hopefully you liked this video. If you did, of course, leave a like, and maybe you can also subscribe to my channel. And I am looking very forward on seeing you in the next episode. Goodbye.